But what I will say is the best part of it, the best thing that came out of it rather, is the alumni group. And every year we do this unbelievable mastermind all over the country. It goes from place to place all over the country. And this particular year, I was honored by being able to be one of the hosts. So I hosted it in New York City. We were going to do Jersey, and we were like, we're too close to the city. We just have to, kind of bite the bullet and do it in New York. And we did, and it was awesome. I mean, it really was, it's kind of a life-changing event every year because it just kind of motivates you to go in a different direction and, improve upon what you're already doing well. So we're gonna do a deep dive into all that I took away from that mastermind, and hopefully you guys get something out of it as well. What I will say is, there's the theme for this year's event was investing. And I wanted to make sure that everybody in that room has done a really nice job of building a book of business. And so the fact that they're all successful in business and they all make money leads us to, all right, well, if you're making money, how do you reinvest that money to work for you? And so that was the theme of this year. We spent a lot of time working on getting the right speakers to make sure that we're highlighting different ways to invest and different ways to approach investment. What I will say is it's not just about investment though. For some of you in this room, maybe you don't have the money to invest. It's also about investing in yourself. And we're going to talk about a lot of different tools and techniques that that these people have been using across the country to really invest in themselves and their business and their clients. What I will give you a disclaimer on before I get going here is this is not a how do we pinch pennies type of conversation. So normally I don't like getting up here and selling product and talking about all the different services and like how I could spend your money. But I will tell you some of these things cost money, period. And sometimes it takes money to make money. So the reality is like if you hear me talking more today than I usually do about products, services, and different ways to approach this, the reason why is because these things are working. So we're going to talk about investing. The other thing that I felt was like a highlight for my takeaway this year is about being touchless. And so the thought process of being touchless is, what can you do in your business and your life to make your lives easier and touch less? Exactly that. And for me, I'm terrible at that. Like I kind of have my hands on everything. I'm a little bit of a control freak in certain ways. And what I realize is I'm at the point in my life and my career where I don't have the ability to do everything. Like it's just impossible. I couldn't do it. And so I have an awesome team around me that I certainly delegate a lot to, but my whole push, like from, even before 30 under 30, but certainly after, is really to move in a direction where I'm touching less. And it doesn't mean that I'm not involved. It doesn't mean that I'm not controlling directionally where I'm going, but it's how can we delegate intelligently? And I think everybody in this room could really, take a lesson to, from that because, and I'm going to use the example, Cyrus, I had him speak here last year. He's a really great friend of mine, and he said something that struck me. And sometimes you hear things a million times, but then you hear them one more time in a different way, and it just changes your thinking. And I'm gonna butcher the numbers a little bit, it's kind of irrelevant, but his thought process was, he was like, Mike, I would rather make $10,000 doing very little than make $100,000 doing a lot. And I looked at him and I was like, that's interesting. Like, kind of expand upon that. Because like, who doesn't want to make $100,000? And his response was awesome. He was like, no, you don't get it. It's not that I don't want to make $100,000. We all want to make more money. But here's what I know. If I can make $10,000 doing very little, then I could figure out a way to duplicate that process. And that duplication, that thought process of doing it over and over and over again is where the growth happens, and that's where the magic is. So it's not so much about what could I touch to grow. It's more of like, what could I do that's going to make a little impact that I have to do very little to make that impact on. And I thought that was a really awesome concept and something that all of us should embrace. So you got to figure out like, what is the most impactful without necessarily, moving mountains to make happen in your business. The low-hanging fruit, we'll call it. The last thing I want to do before I get into this is I just want to talk about the way I approach 30 under 30. I put up a bunch of seeds and I approach it that way, and this is the thought process that I would encourage you to take going into this, is you're not gonna walk out of this conversation and be like, oh my God, I just learned like this deep dive about everything to do with this topic. It's just impossible. Like what the whole goal of this is to plant seeds in your mind to, maybe you take a couple notes on certain things and you say, I'm gonna go and do a deep dive on that topic to learn more about it, because maybe you never heard about what I'm about to talk about. And so that is what I get out of it, is like I leave 30 under 30 and I'm like, all right, I have to investigate this further because this was interesting to me. I'm gonna influence you in a million different ways with different ideas. It's on you to then go out and investigate it and figure out what works for you in your life, okay? All right, so we're gonna jump right into it. We're gonna do 10 impactful systems and tools to use in 2025. Number 10, they're in no particular order, by the way. So I don't know if you saw this, it's called Cuba Casa. So Cuba Casa, very straightforward. You could create floor plans basically for free online. So all you do is you just go into a house, you record, a couple different rooms, all the rooms in the house, you just do a quick recording and they will create floor plans for you. So anybody's like, oh, I have to pay for floor plans. You don't have to pay for floor plans anymore. Very simple system. It's user-friendly, very intuitive. The thing about this system too that I actually thought was really great is it's not just for like 2D floor plans. They have a whole host, I know it's hard to see on the screen, but they have a whole host of different types of floor plans. So if you're doing new construction and you want to do all sorts of fancy stuff, they could do whatever you need. Pretty cool product. Number 9. I always give one of these each year. These are not my favorite things in the whole wide world, I'm not gonna lie, but this is like for the touchy-feely folks who want like something that's like different. Market Dwellings is a site that you could go on and it has all different products. I like these things, and the reason why I give these, promotional product type sites every year, I give one of them, is because every one of them is different in terms of what actually they put on door hangers. Like what's the language? What is the, the marketing push? And if nothing else, it's like R&D, rip off and duplicate. So you could figure out like, oh, I like what this one says. Great, I'm gonna use it, wherever. Whether you buy it from them or buy it from somebody else, I don't really care. But, just for an ideas. Number 9 is kind of like a two-parter. The first one was for the touchy-feely folks. The next one is for the analytical folks. This is called withrome.com. Withrome.com, I am not pushing them in any means, but I want you to think about what they're doing because it's pretty interesting. We have, a tremendous amount of sellers that are out there that have great interest rates on their loans, and many of them have assumable mortgages. What this site does is it markets those assumable mortgages, so you could go out and buy a house and assume their low interest rate. Pretty cool concept. I know those of you around in the 80s are probably like, I remember that. But that's the truth. Like it's a site that does that. So, you could find houses all over the country, but if nothing else, I wanted to just put it on your radar because it's something that you should think about, if you have a tough to sell house and they have an assumable mortgage, great. Like use that as part of the marketing pitch as to why you're marketing and selling that house. Number 8. Meet Folio. So Folio by Amtree, I think it's called Amtree. What Folio does, it's an email service, and basically it's a monthly subscription. It's like $20-something. But what it does essentially is it connects with your email, whatever your email account is, whether it's Gmail or it's Outlook, doesn't really matter. It connects with it and it will create, I forget what they call it, projects, I think might be the word, but it creates projects that are based off of certain transactions. So if you have a transaction, you have all these people involved in a transaction, it will take the whole dialogue, every single piece of that, that transaction, and it'll put it into a project for you and organize it really nicely. What you could do is then invite people to receive, like if they wanted to give let's just say you wanted to give your client access to, everything related to that file, you could do that. You could give, you could shoot off like to lenders or to whatever. It also does timelines for you. So what it essentially is it's like a personal assistant for transactions just built into your email account. Number 7. So Kyle Kovacs was my co-host this year. Kyle did an awesome job presenting on, he does syndications. And everybody in here knows or has heard him talk about syndications. I've had him come here and actually do it. He's done an awesome job. So syndications is what he spoke about is the lessons that he learned dealing with syndications. And for those of you who don't know, think of like buying large scale multifamily developments. So, apartment complexes, that's what he goes out there and focuses on. Well, the apartment complex world, for those of you who might not realize this, is like completely under fire because all of these people went out and bought apartment complexes and then unfortunately interest rates just skyrocketed on them. And most of the loans that were out there that were taken for these apartment complexes are floating loans. They go up and they rise according to interest rates. So it is like, it's just, how do you say, like the world is ending for these people and they're trying whatever they could do to try to keep, to extend these loans, and it's Armageddon for that world is the truth of it. It's like the worst they've seen. And so a lot of apartment complexes are going under, these syndications are going under and there's issues with it. Kyle and his team did a really nice job avoiding that, but it wasn't easy. And what he talked about is he went into a deep dive on like how he avoided that and what he did and the lessons that he learned. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that because quite frankly, I don't think it applies to most of the people in here. But what I will say is he brought up a tool that he uses that I think does apply, and that's Altos Research. Anybody who follows Kyle knows him. He's like all about stats. He just wants to be, as sharp as he could be in terms of understanding the market. And Altos gives him an edge in regards to getting the best market research he possibly can. So it is, again, it's a subscription service, but they call themselves the #1 market data for realtors. They do all sorts of things for your business though. Lead generation, email drip campaigns, website content, social media, yada, yada, yada. So it's just something that if you're looking for really great market research and data and you don't want to compile it yourself, Altos is a really great place to start. Number 6. So this is James Nellis. James Nellis is probably the best MC that I've seen in real estate. He just does a great job of like pulling information out of a crowd. And I've known James for a long time. And I asked him, I said, when we were putting this together, I said, I want you to not necessarily present content, although he's fantastic at that as well, is I want you to just do a session as the MC and try to get, as much information as we can, like crowdsourcing essentially. And so we started the day with a session like that. And James, in addition to doing a nice job with that, he also spoke about something called Fellow. I gotta be honest with you, I never even heard of Fellow prior to this event. If you've never heard of it, you should really check it out because what I'm seeing is some of the top teams in the country are using it right now. And when I saw the amount of hands that went up related to Fellow, in terms of who's using it in the room and like how they raved about it, there's gotta be some value there. So the whole point of Fellow, what's up, Monk? The whole point of Fellow is what it does is it actually it engages your database. So think CRM, but not the way you're used to. It's more like almost like HomeBot in the sense that, it's sending them market information about their home and the pricing related to their home, but it does a really nice job of getting them to engage and say, I want more information about my house. And so that's the whole point of it, is trying to get that engagement, trying to get people to, say, yeah, I want more information, because then you do your things as realtors. They basically expand your brand, get more leads, automate everything. That's the part that I actually would speak to, is everybody talked about the automations related to Fellow. That's, it was just kind of life-changing. So again, look into this further if you wish, but something that a lot of people spoke to. And everybody said the same thing that I heard across the board, and it's that Fellow helps me get more listings. So my antennas go up every time I hear somebody say that, because that's the name of the game. We all want more listings. And so when somebody says to me, and not somebody, a lot of people kept saying, oh, I just keep getting more and more listings from it. I don't know, I take notice. So this is Josh Janis. Josh is, he looks as young as he is. So he's in his early 20s. He's not a 30 under 30, but we rarely do this, and we did it this year. We actually invited somebody to be a guest speaker that's not a 30, and we invited him. He's on, by the way, that episode 545, that's Bigger Pockets. So anybody who's familiar with Bigger Pockets podcast, which is big investing podcast, probably the largest or one of the largest in the world. But he speaks on Bigger Pockets, and Josh rather, he's just an incredible guy. He's in his early 20s. He owns over 200 houses. He did not come from money. In fact, he did not come from money, very much so. But he's really just embraced BRRRR. So that's buy, renovate, rent, refi, repeat. So he's big on that. He does it in Cleveland, and there were certain things that I was just you can't not be impressed by this guy. The fact that I think of myself when I was 21, 22, I was drunk at a club, and this guy is basically just setting the world on fire, and he owns half of Cleveland. So, I realize his, average sales price is less than around here, but the truth is it doesn't matter. He's doing it. And, his income is less too, if you think about it. He's selling real estate. So, God bless you. So he spoke about, and many people in this room probably have heard of this before, but I want to give it a highlight, is PropStream. So PropStream, what it allows you to do is basically buy lists. So think about targeted lists, on-market, off-market listings. You could go after zombie properties and flippers and divorce filings and people that own tax liens and all these different things. So non-owner occupied properties, you name it. It just gives you lists of who to target. Now what Josh did an amazing job with that I was impressed by is he has VAs, and he's not just buying these lists. He has 2 Filipino VAs that all they do all day long is call down these lists. It's all they do. And his approach is very simple. He walks into a house, he'll either buy it or he'll sell it. You tell me what makes sense for you. And the strategy is an easy one because he's gonna be able to answer whatever need they have. You want me to buy cash in 5 days? Great, I'll figure it out. You want me to go out there and find you a buyer and get you the tippy top dollar for today's market? Great, I can figure that out. So, the thought process of buying a system of targeted leads and then having a VA make the calls for you is definitely a direction we're going to talk about more. PropStream is $99 a month. The other thing that I love about PropStream that's worth mentioning is data append. So you could actually, if you drive down you drive down the road and you see a house and, let's just say it's beat up and you're like, oh, that could be a good house for an investor. It's 123 Main Street in such and such town. You do data append and it'll tell you their email address, who owns it, their cell phone, who their attorney is if it's on file, everything you could possibly get for these people. So now you know who to reach out to. And data append on PropStream is 10 cents or 12 cents or something like that per lead. So it's not going to break the bank. This is the contact property owner's site. This is data append or skip tracing. All right, number 4, slick text. You guys have heard me talk, I think last year, about slide broadcast. Slick text is very similar in that if you want to do text message marketing, and you want to just get in front of 1 million people via text message, here's an easy resource for you to use. It's really that simple. It's it teaches you all different ways to, if you're into events, great tactic to use. I can tell you right now, I send out, I don't know how many people, I send this invite to, and I get back these how many open rates. If I get a 70% open rate, it's great. 70, 80%, and I do sometimes, but the truth is not every email, some emails you get 20%. It depends on the time when you send it out, what the pull is, if it's something that interests people. People tend to look at text messages more. I wouldn't be annoying about it. If you text them every 5 minutes, they're gonna wanna kill you. But the truth is if you do it tastefully, it's a really good strategy. They have, different packages, $29 a month for 500 text messages. The nice part about it is it kind of gives like integrations where you could do one text message for 1 million people and not have to like think about it. So that's why you would use this instead of doing it yourself. Number 3, ChatGPT. I realize that everybody's like, all right, I heard about this 1 million times. I have to be real. Sometimes I go into these sessions, I pay for ChatGPT every single month, the $20 a month. I have been doing that since they pretty much rolled it out and allowed you to pay for it. And it's such a great resource. I don't think that I am scratching the surface of what these people are using ChatGPT for. Like some of these agents or and business owners, I mean, it's almost like their personal assistant. Like we'll be sitting there and it's like, I have a question like, ChatGPT, pretend like you're a CPA and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, like voice to text now. And so I wanted to just highlight a few things that came across to me as like, wow, that I didn't think about with ChatGPT that I heard. Scheduling showings for your clients. So I wouldn't even think to use ChatGPT for scheduling showings. But like, let's assume that you're going to show houses, you have 5 houses to show them, and it's just not an area you're familiar with. What do people do? They put in, please create a scheduled tour for the following addresses. I need to know the best order and routes, distances between each location, driving time, and I'll need to spend a half hour at each location. I'll be starting at 12 p.m. Here are the addresses. Never thought about this. So I put in my offices just to, to give you an example. So I put in all my offices and basically this is what it spits back out. It says like, the driving distance from Maplewood to Summit is 5.6 miles, driving time approximately 15 minutes. I'll arrive at 12:45, spend 30 minutes at the first stop, yada, yada, yada. So then I was like, okay, that's cool, but I want to take it a step further. And I said, what is the optimal order based on traffic patterns at that time of the day? So I put that in, and it literally gives me, not only does it give me what the traffic patterns is, it did change the route, just so you know, but it says reason. Traffic tends to flow smoothly around this time, and Milburn Ave is relatively free of congestion at midday. And it was like, for each one, it talks about like why you're gonna go at that time versus a different time. It's pretty cool. Like, and it's one less thing of, if you think about the date, I remember when I was showing houses, I would like be jumping on like Google Maps and like, it was like, oh, I'm gonna try to figure this one out. Like, you don't have to do any of this shit. Like, you literally just like punch it into ChatGPT and say, go. So simple. Another one is simplifying complexity. Simplifying complexity, this is, I use an example that's recent. We have all been dealing with all the changes that have come out in the most recent legislation. I've talked about it ad nauseum, but basically, it got cut off, the Real Estate Consumer Protection Enhancement Act. So that act that just came out that changed real estate, what if you have a client that's interested in, let's just say you never came to Growth Mastermind, you know nothing about it, like you just know that this document came out and a client asks you about it and you're like, ugh, I don't really know what the changes are. I swear this is what I did. I took this document, it's 18 pages long. I just copied the whole entire document. I pasted it in ChatGPT and I said, please provide me with up to 10 bullet points explaining the new law changes so I can provide my clients with an understanding of what they could expect, right in a professional yet casual way. This is what it came out with. Here are the 10 key points explaining the upcoming changes to the real estate laws in New Jersey effective August 1st, 2024. These updates are important for both buyers and sellers to understand, yada, yada, yada. So number 1, agency relationships defined. Agents must clearly outline their role in the transaction representing the buyer, seller, or both. Written agreements will be required up front so the clients know exactly who their agent is working with, who their agent is working for and how. That's the first thing that changed. Like, the truth is, and this is the context that I'm giving you it in, but what I heard the context was from a commercial broker who said, sometimes people ask me about like zoning issues, and there's this whole thing on like the zoning in a particular area, and I'm like, I don't know. And I'll be on the phone and they'll ask me like, oh, well, what's the zoning for blah, 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 blah. And on the phone, on the fly, she'll go in, she'll find the zoning code, drop it into ChatGPT and say, break it down quickly so I could explain it. And it's like, literally, she seems like this like absolute expert on everything in life because she's just getting ChatGPT to give it to her in bite-sized pieces so she could explain it to a client. It's pretty brilliant. So I understand that we should be checking what ChatGPT is putting out. I'm not saying that you should, like just take, everything that they say and, as the holy grail. But when you're giving it information, like a direct input, and you're asking for a concise output, there's nothing better. Like you're not gonna find a better way of doing this. And how much time are all of you guys spending on a regular basis, every single day of your life, with clients asking you questions that you have to go into this whole long explanation on to just give them like, some little piece so they get it. Well, ChatGPT could do that for you in like 3 seconds. So lean into it, start to use it. For $20 a month, this is like a no-brainer. Another one that somebody brought up is a sales pitch. And so I was like, ugh, I don't know if I'd want them to do my pitch for me. And then I actually tried it. So I said, help me create a sales pitch to homeowners that inherited their property through probate. So I pay for a lot, I invest, I buy houses, I pay for a lot of these services. And probate's like a really good way to find deals in today's market, period. And a lot of these people, it's not even they're in a bad situation, it's just they don't want to deal with it. They're like, you know what, like I don't care, like, I just want to get this house sold and keep it moving in my life. So, if you could give them efficiencies, naturally, they're going to be more interested in working with you. So this sales pitch, this is what it came out with. Introduction. Hi, homeowner. I understand that inheriting a property can be both a blessing and a challenge. You've gained a valuable asset, but it also comes with responsibilities such as upkeep, taxes, and sometimes even emotional ties. I specialize in helping people like you who have inherited properties navigate the selling process with ease and confidence. That sounds good. Sounds good. The reality is you're touching upon the emotional stuff. You're very clearly articulating what you're looking to do and help them with. This is not, nonsense. This is good stuff. It has a close, it breaks down every single thing you're gonna do, address the pain points. Dealing with a probate property can be overwhelming, whether it's maintenance costs, legal responsibilities, or the emotional stress of holding on to a home that may not fit into your plans. Selling can be a practical and freeing solution. I understand that selling a home through probate can seem complicated, but that's where I come in. That's good. It's the reality is I couldn't script up a better script than this, and I do this for a living. So the truth is you got to think differently about how you're using this tool. It really is that good. It's worth leaning into. All right. Number 2. So I don't love Zoom calls and Teams meetings and all that stuff, but I get pulled into them all the time. And I have not really, the AI revolution that's upon us. I've definitely dabbled in it to an extent, but I didn't really lean into all things AI as quickly as some of these people have. And this is something that I thought was really, really useful. If you do any type of an event or any type of meeting, and I would encourage you, some of these people, which I thought was really interesting, they do every meeting that they do online because they don't want to leave their house. And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm serious. They take all their client meetings online. And it's just this back and forth. But what they also do with it, and I'm not encouraging you to do that. I like face-to-face. That's why we're all here right now. But the truth is they use 2 systems that I thought were really worth bringing up. Fathom is one of them. What it does is it basically is a note taker that just records everything that you're doing within a meeting. And then the AI portion of it takes all of the notes that, the transcript, let's call it, of that meeting, and it breaks it down into bite-sized notes of here are the most important things that came out of that meeting. So you have a transcript of this is what this meeting was about, here are the bullet points, and by the way, here are all the calls to action. At minute 42, you said, I'm gonna send you XYZ, make sure to send XYZ. It's pretty awesome to when you do a meeting and you realize that this is what I got out of it. So What it also does, and by the way, there's another one, this is very similar. It's called fireflies.ai. Both of these systems do very similar things. So you just figure out which one makes the most sense for you. They work with Teams, they work with Zoom. They also work on phone calls. You could literally record every phone call that you ever did. Do not bring it to court. Like, you can't, it's illegal for you to like record people. But if you want to just like stay on top of like, for your own notes, stay on top of what was said during phone calls with clients, you could record everything and basically like have it for yourself to go back to later. It's pretty awesome software. So, use it legally. I'm not trying to tell you to break any laws. But I just felt like, for me, I was thinking along the lines of like, all right, if I do a one-on-one meeting, a coaching call, let's call it, with an agent, and I'm walking them through whatever it is we're talking about, for me to have Fathom record every single thing that happened in that conversation and then send that agent a recording and a transcript of what happened and what the call to actions are, that makes life so much easier for both of us. It's not something that I have to think about. They don't have to take notes if they don't want to. Like, we could actually have a real conversation and not worry about like what comes next, because we're gonna get a transcript and a breakdown of what comes next. Number one, this was, by the way, these were in no particular order. I think this one was my favorite, which is why I'm putting it as number one. And it's really good stuff, but there's a little bit of a build up to this. So the question that I have for all of you is, and I really want to see a show of hands. There's, it's kind of a fun question, I guess. But the question is this: how many of you understand that cold calling could help your business? Every person in here should be raising both their hands. So it could definitely help your business. Can you, everybody, keep your hands up? How many of you, by a show of hands, actually cold call? The room, I appreciate those, I appreciate the honesty. So the reality is the room just cut into like probably a quarter. And if I was going to say, of the quarter that are remaining, how many of you actually cold call every single day of your lives, like habitually? If one or two of you still have your hands up, I'd be impressed. Like, it's just not an easy thing. Like, it grinds on you. And everybody here acknowledges that it'll help your business. So the next question that I ask you is, how many in here would agree that a virtual assistant would help your life? Again, everybody should be raising your hand. So the truth of it is if we did the same exercise and said, all right, how many of you have a virtual assistant or an assistant? Most of you are going to put your hands down once again. So that's the reality of every single room you go into in real estate across the country. It doesn't matter where you are, who you're talking to. Everybody has those same things that are true, and yet even though we know they're true, we don't do them. And I was sitting there and I was talking to Juan Carlos, who's a good friend of mine. So Juan, one of the things that I love about Juan is he's like a student of real estate. So Juan went out and he hosted this event, more recently, and he invited some of the top real estate agents in the country to come and speak. And he paid a lot of money to get these speakers out. He lost a ton of money in the event. God bless you. But the thing is like, it was worth it for Juan, and we were having this conversation that it was worth it for him to do because he got to have one-on-one time with some of the top people that are doing this at the highest of the high levels. And what he did was he did a presentation. I asked him to be one of the speakers, and he did a presentation about what he learned from working with the top agents in the world. And he went through like all of these top agents and explained like, I learned this from this person and this from this person, but then there were just some like bigger takeaways. So the number one lesson that he learned is what I'm going to share with you. How can you be the best agent in the world, or how can you get to that level? It's very simple. It's all about implementing leverage. That's it. It's so simple, but yet we don't do it really well. And what these top people are doing, even the people that I know here in this room that are doing this at a really high level, you're figuring out ways to leverage your time, your efforts. You're working smarter, not harder in many cases. So the implementing leverage piece is very simple. Most agents think leverage is hiring a transaction coordinator. That's not really accurate. That's like low-level stuff. And fortunately, we give you guys all transaction coordinators, so hopefully that's working for you as well. But real leverage comes from hiring a full-time assistant specifically to generate you more leads. So we have full-time assistants, many of us, but it's like, is that person adding to the bottom line, or are they taking away from the bottom line? And I don't mean that as a knock to assistants, because truthfully, if they're freeing you up to go out and make more money and to, build relationships, great. That's a good thing. But the reality is like the best of the best are figuring out ways to hire assistants to generate them business. And doing that at a very high level, because if you go back to the thought process that I started with Cyrus in the beginning, what did he say? He said, I would rather figure out something that I make $10,000 on that I do very little for, and then duplicate it. Well, the nice part about it is if you could find an assistant that generates you business and generates more business than you're paying them for, then naturally, what do? You duplicate, and you just keep doing the same thing and get more assistants to the point where all you do all day long is go out on appointments. And so that's what these people are doing at a very high level, and it's like kind of the secret sauce that all of us could do, but we're not thinking about. So the cool part about it is, and he said this, Juan did, which I thought was like, yes, you're 100% right. We all know we could do it, but none of us do it. And what he's built, because he is the king of systems, what he's built is basically an inside sales assistant program that takes VAs and takes cold calling, essentially, puts them together, and he goes out and he flew across the world, and built like a village of VAs, like to the point where it's just, he's got an army of people that are not slouches. They're like, they have doctorate degrees, many of them, just because it's very lucrative in their countries to get paid as a VA versus, like, they get paid better than pharmacists and doctors, many of them. So, the reality is it's good business and they speak perfect English. So I was listening to him talk about this, and I, for one, and I'm like many of you, I'm busy. I got a million things. I got 4 little girls, picking kids out of cars because they get into a car accident with their babysitter this morning. Like, stuff happens. It's just life. But the truth of it is like, I know what I need. I know what I need to grow. I know what I need to, to support what it is that I'm doing. So I listened to his whole, conversation about this, and I grabbed him on the side and I said, Juan, I'm hiring you. And he started laughing. I was like, I'm hiring you. Like, I think that what you're bringing to the table makes a lot of sense. And quite frankly, I'm in. So I did. I went out there and I hired him. And it's basically, I don't care about listing appointments, but I basically hired like an inside sales assistant rather. And the reason why I signed up is it was $10,000 to sign up, just so you know. So it's an upfront cost to like go out there and get, this person, onboarded and everything else. It's a lot of money. But what I thought is like, all right, well, what is the upside of it? And I'll tell you very simply, the upside of it is, first of all, they do payment plans. So you could pay like monthly. It's super cheap when you break it down. But it's $3 an hour to have an assistant. And these are like literally like educated people that know what they're doing at a high level. So when I started to like see like the math of it, I said, all right, there's a little bit of an upfront cost, but I want to go through this process myself so I understand, does it make sense for all of you? So I did that, and I gotta be honest, I was kind of blown away by it, because what they did is they set us up like in the intro. These were the 3 programs that they set us up with. So Calendly, if you're not using it, it links up to your calendar. So they know based on my calendar when I can get appointments and when I can't get appointments. I don't have to talk to them. They don't see what my appointments are. They just see time blocked out. So they know I cannot take a meeting during this time, which is how I have like recruiters and stuff like that work for me locally. And basically they're already doing this. So I'm used to this world. They put stuff on my calendar all the time. But it's a nice thing to wake up and to have a meeting set up with a $300,000 producer that I never even spoke to. But I know that, like, all right, now I know a little bit about them. I could sit down with them and let's see if it makes sense to do business together. For all of you, if you wake up in the morning and you have $1 million listing that's now on your calendar to go out and do a listing appointment, that's a good way to wake up. It's a great way to wake up, especially if you didn't touch anything to do it. So that's the whole point of this. With Calendly, it just builds it right into your calendar. What they also do is Vulcan 7. Vulcan 7 is basically like for cold calling. It gives you all sorts of different lists that you could call down and go after FSBOs and expireds and all the people that you should call that you don't call, they call. And you have your own account, so you could actually, not only do you see every single person that they're calling, but you also are able to see who they're calling, and you can listen to the voice recordings of the call. So you could say, oh, this person made X number of calls, and the truth is they're supposed to make 300 calls a day. So, and they have triple dialers and all that other stuff, but basically, they're calling on the, people that are not on the do not call list, just to be clear. But what they're doing is like they're calling these people, and you could listen to what the scripts and dialogues are. You could see how many calls they made, what the calls look like. If you want to do coaching with them and say, hey, I would have preferred you to answer it this way, not that way, you could do that. Or you don't have to touch anything and just set it and forget it. Payoneer is pretty cool because I don't want to send somebody in some random country around the world my information financially. Well, great. Payoneer is like PayPal or Venmo. Like, it's just a pay system that allows them to get paid without actually accessing any of your account information. So they have it down to a science. It's really like pretty freaking good. And in the first week, I already met this person. It was 2 weeks now. I met this person. Like, she already started making calls, and like, I really like it. I think it's actually like working. And to me, what I love about it is there's very little for me to touch. And for the amount of money that I'm spending on it, it's like nothing. We're talking about a few $100s a month. So, please.
Just to be clear, so $10,000 for the year?
It's just an upfront cost of a setup cost is $10,000. Yeah. And then you're not paying them anything. You're just paying, if you're paying, let's just say it's $3 an hour for 40 hours a week. It's like, what is it, 120? Correct. Yeah, the list that's being provided, they're doing from Vulcan 7. They could get trained in other software if you want them to. I just didn't want to touch their system. I said, you guys have a good system. I want to see how your system runs. And like, I don't know. I think it's pretty good so far.
And you have one person you have hired.
I do. Yeah.
And you're able to listen.
They do train, so they actually, let me just give you like how sophisticated they've gotten with this. This is the reason why I bought into it. I'm giving you like a quick sales pitch and why I think it makes sense, is they hired somebody who's a linguistics specialist who literally coaches them on proper English in all situations. So they have somebody on staff that listens to their calls and says, you should have said this differently because just from a lingo perspective, it sounds clearer. Like, I mean, they have every box checked you can imagine. Like, I was blown away by the level that he got to. And it's because this is how his brain works. He's like a little machine. And, he's ChatGPT in the flesh. And I love him for it because my brain doesn't work that way. Like, I'm big picture, all that kind of stuff. Like, he's very detailed. And, I respect people that kind of get it to that level. So I also negotiated a deal for everybody in here. I basically said, listen, I have 1 million agents that like I work with. You got to give me some type of discount. So he basically took like $2,000 off the $10,000 if you guys are interested. Go ahead. Honestly, it's just like a one-on-one. I don't even know the name of the company off the top of my head. If you're interested, just shoot me an email and I'll send you the information. I'm just going to connect you with him personally. So. Just make sure you put VA in the email because I'm not going to respond if you don't. Juan Barenche? Yeah, I call him Juan because I don't know. I'm gonna screw that up. What's up?
That's right.
I love it. Did you guys hear this? She said she's going to resend me the email she sent me last week with VA in the subject. Well played. Listen, I'm trying to go touchless. Not with you. I'm just kidding. So, all right. The next thing, we went through a list of top 10, systems and stuff like that. If nothing else, if you get nothing from what I just said, I hope you get the point that directionally, we have to be smarter about how we're operating in our business. I have so many agents that'll come up to me and they'll say like, I'm spending like $10,000 on Tom Ferry coaching. I'm like, awesome. Good for you. Like, I don't have any problem with Tom Ferry. I'm not knocking Tom Ferry. That's not the point of this. But it's like, for the same $10,000, you could go out and get somebody that for 40 hours a week is just generating you leads. Like, I mean, come on. Like, there's no comparison. Like, you have to think about like what makes the most sense in terms of the time and money that you're spending. And I think that like the smartest of the smart in this business are leveraging that properly. So I don't care if you use Juan or if you use anybody else. I personally am going to use Juan, and I am using Juan because I haven't seen something better. Like, if something comes along better, I would promote that. But that's really the point of it. We do a segment every year at 30 Under 30 that's like, what are the best books you read? So I'm gonna give you 2 slides on books that people were like raving about. I'm not gonna necessarily touch on any of these, but this is the other slide. This is like, Nellis put this one together. This is like all different books that he read that he was talking about. I read a lot of these books and some of them are fantastic. I mean, you've heard me talk about Never Split the Difference, 7 Levels of Communication, awesome book. Cash Flow Quadrant, awesome book. Loved Grit. Can't Hurt Me is like one of my favorite books. I read that marathon training and it was the perfect book for that. How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's 100 years old. It's still good as when it was written. Fanatical Prospecting, if you want to call till your hand falls off, that's the book. So it's a lot of good ones in there. I'm going to send these out, yeah. So I'm going to touch upon From Strength to Strength. These are just 3 other books that I threw on there. Everybody talks about The Ruthless Elimination and Hurry. I read that book. It has a little bit of a religious undertone, FYI. It very much models like Jesus. I'm not trying to be an evangelist, but I will tell you, like, very good book. I actually just read, I had so many people talk to me about Die with Zero. At 30 Under 30 this year that I was like, I got to just pull the trigger and read it. I read, it's like a 5-hour read. It's like quick. I read that book this past week in the last 2 days. And honestly, it's fantastic. It's just like got you to think very differently about how you approach money and how you approach your life and everything else. I'm probably going to do a deep dive on, Die with Zero at a future event, maybe next month. Because it's just like a book worth highlighting, just the way that he approaches things. So if you haven't read it, it's worth it. And we're going to talk about From Strength to Strength because this is one of our speakers kind of did a deep dive on that. All right. So we're not going to do any breaks because we just feel like we just got started. I'm just going to jump into this financial piece. Financial fortification is what this segment's about. And basically, I stole that title from Kendra Todd. So Kendra Todd, I asked her to speak. She was the winner of The Apprentice. She's a 30 Under 30. She hosted an HGTV show. She's a real estate broker in Seattle and South Florida. She hits both corners of the country. And just an absolute rock star, 30 Under 30. So Kendra and I, we actually got to know each other really well last year in Seattle. And we had dinner together and we sat and just talked about just investments and stuff like that. And she's just an absolute powerhouse. But what she would do is she started buying single family homes, and then she eventually started to buy multifamilies, and she went from single families to multifamilies. She bought trailer parks. She was doing financing on trailer mobile homes. She just dabbled in so many different things. Nowadays, she kind of makes me laugh because she's like, I don't want to deal with people, so she's buying storage. She's like, I want to buy storage facilities because the nice part about a storage facility is people will not pay for their rent, but they will never let their stuff go. Yeah. So, people will always pay because they know if you don't pay for your stuff, it's getting taken away, where you can't evict in a lot of these places. So she's super funny. But here's the thing, when I started talking to her in prepping for this, because she was one of the speakers, and obviously as a host, I had the ability to call these people and just kind of talk them through what's the topic and all that. the thing that, the reason why I wanted her to speak is she has like this insane portfolio of real estate. I mean, I don't remember the exact number, but like think like $15-20 million, maybe even more, $25 million in real estate holdings. And she kind of, I don't want to say she did it on accident, but like she just like throughout her career just like bought a house and bought a this and bought a that. And like they were good investments, like most of them. Some of them were not so much, she said. But the truth is like she just like acquired this like massive portfolio and all buy and hold for the most part. And the thing is like she woke up a few years ago and was like, whoa, like I have this insane portfolio. And in some ways, like, I'm paraphrasing, but in some ways it's like built on a block of ice. Because even though I own all of this, I don't have the right operating agreements in place. I don't have the right like tools in place in case, God forbid, I passed away. Like I don't have like all of the fortification of my business. I don't have that in place. And so she started to think about it and she was like, I need to treat this like a business. Because for years, I ran a real estate brokerage and I ran my team and all of that. And I did such an amazing job with that and I grew that out. And that's where my focus was. And I have systems in place and I have everything done properly on that front. And I didn't do that on the investment side. Because on the investment side, it was kind of this passive thing that I was doing with my excess income. And so it's funny because I was kind of in the same place as her when we had this conversation, where I've been thinking about a lot lately, like I have this really nice real estate portfolio and I own like, tons of buildings and like, it brings in a good amount of money, like passively and everything else. Passively is a joke, but, it brings in like, money and whatnot. But the truth is like, I don't feel like I did a great job with like building the infrastructure around that business because I did what we all do. We're in real estate and it's like, well, that one looks like a good one. Let's buy that. And it's like, eventually you start to learn. So what she did a whole session on, and most of the sessions, some of it is pulled from other people in the same conversations, but we're just gonna do a deep dive on it. And again, I'm going back to that seed principle. There are things that I'm about to talk about that we could spend an hour on one of these slides. There's no way that I could possibly teach you some of these things, quick, hitter type conversation. So the goal of this is I want you to think about some of these concepts and then go back and speak to your accountant or your attorney or, your spouse or whoever and figure out what makes the most sense for you. This is not going to be like an all-in education thing. Number one, the rule of 72. I had never heard of this rule before, and apparently it's like pretty basic stuff. But the rule of 72 is this idea of how quickly will it take me to double up my money in any particular investment. And so the rule is, it's a math equation, but it's basically 72 divided by the rate of return. So if I make a 20% return on a given investment, how long will it take me to double that investment? All you do is you do 72 divided by that 20%, okay? This is just like a quick breakdown. So if you think about it, where it says annual interest rate, think of that as the rate of return. So annual interest rate is how much money am I making back? If you were the bank and you lent out money, how much are you making back? That's why it's written as interest rate. So 1%, if you are making a 1% return, the rule of 72 is going to take you almost 70 years to double your money. This is why you should not keep your money in the bank. It's a God's honest truth. Like, you don't need anything else to tell you why you shouldn't keep your money in the bank. Because if you keep your money in the bank, you're going to live your whole life and it's barely going to double. So when you get into better returns, obviously 100% return, you doubled your money in 1 year. And the cool part about it is like, you have to start thinking about whether it's any investment, but let's just use real estate because that's the forum we're in. So when I think about a real estate investment, if I put up $50,000 to buy a flip and I make $100,000 off of that flip, that's a pretty good return. Like that makes a lot of sense. Now, obviously, you gotta make sure that, some of this is like the less money you put in, the more your return is gonna be. You also wanna make sure that there's enough return where it's safe. Like I personally, I'll use this as an example, I wouldn't put my money, I wouldn't put $20,000 up to make $20,000 on a real estate investment. Me personally, I wouldn't do that because the numbers are too tight. Like you have one issue go wrong and now all of a sudden that $20,000 is wiped out. So, be smart. It's not just about the rule of 72, but I think that the rule of 72 is actually a pretty interesting way to look at like, where should I put my money and why? Just a basic starting point. Number 2, section 179 of the tax code. And I'm just gonna read this. An immediate expense deduction that business owners can take for purchases of depreciable business equipment instead of capitalizing and depreciating the asset over a period of time. I'm gonna tell you a lot of the slides that I'm about to talk about are related to taxes. Why? Because the government loves to take our money. It's the truth. And a big part of the return that we make on any investment is figuring out ways to shelter the government from taking a percentage of that return. I'm gonna be honest with you, like this is something that I've done a really poor job of throughout my career, and I'm getting really smart on because I'm seeing how much money I'm paying the government and it makes me wanna throw up. So now I'm like, all right, I've optimized the returns in terms of like I have businesses where I've been so concerned with, okay, I have a bed and breakfast, like I need to get to as close to as possible in terms of like 100% of occupancy as I can. All right, well, that's marketing, that's doing all these things to try to build occupancy. Well, that's great, but if I'm paying the government most of that money back because I just didn't optimize my taxes, that's on me. Like you could go around running around crazy trying to fix all these investments and then not optimize your taxes and screw yourself. So the section 179 of the tax code is something that you should like actually read into. I'm not gonna teach you it right now, but there's literally a website dedicated. The official website of section 179, it's section179.org, just to give you an idea of how important this is. So I'm gonna give you an example, just an easy example. So I got approached from my father the other day. My parents every year, my mom doesn't like to fly in particular, and my dad they like to go away. They go to Florida usually during the winter. And so now they've been driving to Florida. And my father was like, oh, I gotta get a new car. Like I don't wanna put the miles on this other car, blah, blah, blah. And so he approached me wanting to buy my car. So I was like, all right, I'd be open to that. Like I kind of want to get a new car anyway. So I started looking at new cars and then I went to this session and I was like, oh, all right, well now I feel a little bit different about buying a new car than I did before because Section 179 in tax deduction allows eligible businesses to deduct the cost of machinery and qualifying equipment when filing their taxes. This could be for office furniture, technology, supplies, and other tangible items. Yes, that includes business vehicles. I'm in business, I have a vehicle. So when you look at this, heavy section 179 vehicles, any vehicle with at least 6,000 pounds, but no more than 14,000. All right, well, I want to buy a car with 6,000 pounds. And there's a lot of cars. I want an SUV anyway, so it kind of makes sense. The truth of it is there's a lot of cars where the manufacturers make cars specifically at 6,000 pounds for this reason. So for 2024, eligible vehicles in the heavy category have a Section 179 tax deduction limit of $30,000. However, these autos are eligible for 60% bonus depreciation through the end of 2024. Starting in 2025, the allowable bonus depreciation will decrease to 40%. I'm buying a car between now and January. And I'm going to write off $30,000 of it, and then I'm gonna write off bonus depreciation for an additional 60%. So to me, if you're buying an $80,000 car, well now without even negotiating with the dealership, I just got the price of that car down to $50,000, and it's gonna be less than that after I'm done depreciating more, because that's money I'm paying the government right now. Period. I'm not an accountant, seek out your accountant, but I'm paying the government, believe me. And the reality is it's a simple thing. I could go out and get a nicer vehicle and it'll cost me less money because I'm just being smart about the tax code. You have to, so it's funny you say that. So when you look at, I'm glad you brought this up, because when you look at depreciation is they take the whole asset for the length of the asset and they depreciate it over time. So if I sell it next year, they recapture the depreciation. You gotta be careful with that. If I use the vehicle for its average service life, it's not a problem. Again, talk to your accountant, but like that's something that you gotta be careful about the recapture, because you don't wanna have to pay. Essentially all you're doing in that sense is deferring your taxes. Yeah. So number 3, the Augusta rule. Anybody ever hear of the Augusta rule? I got one person in here. Oh, this makes me so happy. All right, so for those people who own a primary residence, you're not renting. I don't know if you realize this. Everybody understand what Augusta is? It's where the Masters are for golf. So years ago, the Masters, people were renting out their home for the Masters, and they essentially, like, think of like a 2-week period. They were renting out their homes, and the government was taxing them off of the revenue that came in for those 2-week period. Well, they made a rule, probably because there were so many politicians going down to Augusta, but they made a rule that basically said, no, you have the right to rent your property for 14 days a year tax exempt. All right, so why does this matter? Because I'm sure none of us in here, myself included, want to sign up for renting my property for 14 days, like, and allowing people to come into my primary residence. That will never happen. You're a business owner. You could rent your property to yourself as your business. So what you're essentially doing is the IRS provision that allows homeowners to rent their home for up to 14 days each year without having to report the rental income received on their individual tax returns. The rule dates back to the 1970s, Augusta residents, yada, yada, yada. So I'm gonna skip down to this. Business owners may be able to use the exemption to rent their home to their business for meetings. You have to be sure to keep detailed records for the IRS and charge a competitive rate based on the current market. So if you're in business, all of us are in business, you could rent your own property to yourself for 14 days to have business meetings, keep an accounting of what you did for business during those 14 days. You could get the rental income. You're basically taking the rental income from your business, so now it's a business expense that goes against your taxes on your business, and you're pushing it to personal where you're allowed to collect that tax-free. It's kind of like a double savings. And the reality of it is you could do it every year for 14 days. I realize that, I don't know where you live, but let's just say my house would cost $10,000 a month to rent it, somewhere thereabouts, maybe a little bit more. Like, the reality is like, that's $5,000 in savings that I picked up from some silly rule. Like, it adds up. You know, it just adds up here and there, and we just gotta get smart about this stuff. Number 4, cost segregation. Anybody have heard of cost segregation in here? I got one person, 2. I have to be honest with you, this is the most low-hanging fruit and the biggest return you will ever get in your life if you do it well. And I just went and did a cost segregation study on every single property that I own, straight down the line, and it is life-changing, the amount of savings that I got, and I'm gonna explain it. So this is the idea of cost segregation. No cost segregation. If you own a property, let's say it's a $750,000 purchase, $150,000 of it is land, is the land of it. So it's got a 27.5-year class, which basically says it's a $600,000 because you got to remove the land. And the deduction every year is essentially $22,000. And it's just like a straight line deduction, you know, for the length of that 27.5 years. With a cost segregation study, which I'm going to talk about in a second, it essentially, what it does is it breaks this asset down into pieces that you could depreciate at different timetables based off of what the actual, you know, the components are of that house. And I'm gonna explain this, it'll take more form in a second. So in year 1 on this example, instead of being able to deduct $22,000, you could deduct $120,000. So look at it like this will give it a little bit more life here. So there are certain components of a house that have a 5-year depreciation schedule, carpeting, decor, certain electrical systems. Then there's some that have a 7-year depreciation schedule. That's like furniture, fixtures, equipment. Some have a 15-year, sidewalks, parking lots, fences, landscaping. And then some have a 39-year, which is the building, the roof, the foundation, plumbing, and HVAC. So what I did was I hired an engineering firm, and I sent them out to a house that I had bought down the shore, and I said, I want to do a cost segregation study. The cost segregation study for that particular building, with all in, cost me $9,000. So it wasn't cheap, but it brought me back $360,000 in depreciation in year 1. So what does that actually mean? That means that I have a $360,000 loss that I could put up against my income. So if I make $360,000, I don't have to pay $1, not $1 in taxes this year. The government doesn't take anything because it's a loss against it. So, go ahead.
Can you use part of that 1 year and then carry forward?
It carries forward. It carries forward every year. Everybody, remember years ago, and I'm not getting political here, I'm just being honest. Remember years ago when they were killing Donald Trump over his tax returns? Yeah. And they were like, you have to release your returns, and he didn't want to release his returns. I wouldn't have wanted to release my returns either, but they should be basically patting him on the back for using the tax code correctly. And I'm not, again, this is not me trying to promote anything, I'm just being honest. When you look at what he does with tax returns, he goes out and he buys a skyscraper, and then he does a cost segregation study on the skyscraper, and he breaks the whole entire skyscraper down into 1 million different components, and then he accelerates the depreciation. And so when you accelerate the depreciation, instead of getting it over 30 years, you get the depreciation, much of it, in year 1. And then you take that depreciation and you use it against your income, and you eliminate your tax burden for that year, and then you rinse and repeat. Because now you have way more money that you're able to then take and go out and buy the next building. So now I have all of that tax savings. I go out and buy the next building in year 2, and then I do a cost segregation in year 2 and wipe out my tax burden again. And you just do it over and over and over again. And the nice part about it is right now, and I don't know how this is going to be in the future, and I'm hoping that this doesn't change, but right now you also have something called bonus depreciation. So in addition to the cost segregation study and getting the accelerated depreciation, they also give you, it used to be 100%, now I think it's 80% if I remember correctly, of bonus depreciation in year 1, which means that you're basically getting even more money back. This is what rich people do. This is what rich people do, period. So I will tell you, it's tough to do this on a single family, but, and this is what I learned while I was there, is the reason why it's tough to do on a single family home has nothing to do with can they do a cost segregation? And you can't do it on your primary, so it has to be an investment property. But what happens is, and by the way, this is not for a flip, because if you think about it, with a flip, the whole thought of cost segregation is it's accelerating the depreciation. Depreciation is something you get over time. So when you flip a house, if you do a cost segregation study and then flip the house, well, as soon as you flip it, they're recouping, your basis drops is what happens. I'm not trying to get too technical here, but your basis drops, and eventually what happens is as soon as you go to sell the flip, they recoup the money that you just saved. So it doesn't make sense for flips. It's completely buy and hold. The reason why it doesn't make a ton of sense for single family is because the cost of the study is expensive. But they also have sites, you can look this up, they have a site called DIY cost segregation. So you could do your own cost segregation study. It's a pain in the ass, just being honest. But the reality is if you don't want to pay an engineering firm to do it, you could do it yourself. There's also something, and I didn't go into this in this slide, but I'm just getting really smart on this stuff, is there's something called QIP, Qualified Improvement Property, which is essentially a cost segregation without having to do the study. So talk to your accountant. If you own real estate right now, if you own any buy and hold investment properties, and your accountant doesn't know what cost segregation is, fire them. I'm serious, fire them. I changed accountants because of this. Because I realized that I was This is the lowest of the low hanging fruit to give you the best return possible. So if your accountant doesn't know what it is, they're not good at their job. Just being real about that. Number 5, paying tax on the seed, not the harvest. I'm going to tell you, still to this day, I'm doing this differently than she, proposed. And I don't know what's right or wrong. So this is not something that I'm like saying do this, but it's something worth looking into. Let's call it that. So what she does is she moved every year. She's transitioning all of her traditional IRAs over to Roth IRAs. Her thought process, and I don't think it's a bad one, is that over time, taxes are going to rise. Like the tax rate is going to rise. And over time, the amount of money she has in her IRA is going to significantly go up. So what she's thinking, and I think that she's probably right about this part at least, is she's thinking about, I would rather pay taxes on the seed, the amount of money that I'm putting into an IRA today, than the harvest, the amount of money that comes out later. And there's one thing that she said to me that I thought was triggering, because my parents are going through it right now. I don't remember the age. Is it 67, 70, 72? I don't know, somewhere in that range, where it forces you to pull out from your IRA. So there's 72, so 73. So I'm butchering that, I don't want to get that wrong. But basically, at a certain point, the government forces you to take money out of your 401k. You're required to. And what if you don't need the money or want the money? What if you don't want to pay the taxes in this given year? In my parents' situation, they're fortunate where they've done well, and they don't need their 401k money right now. My dad has a pension, they have Social Security, they have money saved. They don't need that money right now. So for them, my father and my mother are kind of the mindset of we would rather just keep that money in the 401k, leave it there, let it continue to grow, and if we allow it to grow, eventually, when we pass away, if we have to give it to our heirs, my brother and I, the reality is then the tax burden goes away. So their thought process is, I don't want to touch it. Well, if you do a traditional IRA, you're forced to touch it. If you do a Roth IRA, you don't have to touch it. And so that to me was oh, that kind of makes a lot of sense. You could keep that, continuing to build even after the age of 72, 73, because they're not going to force you to touch it because the government has no taxes that they're going after. So she started to switch over everything into Roth. And basically it's the tax, you're getting a tax break now versus a tax break later. So it just depends on what you care about more. But what I thought was this is a big thing. She said you must have cash on hand to pay the income tax on the conversion. So when you're converting, you don't want them to reduce your account by what you have to pay for it. You want to just pay that up front, out of cash. So that was something that, just be aware of. But this is what I thought was really, where it really gets interesting, is self-directed IRAs allow you to invest in almost anything that's investable. You're not limited to standard investments such as stocks or bonds. You can invest in a wide variety of alternative assets that typically fall outside of what most financial institutions are able to handle. Here's where it gets really cool. So what she's doing is she has a self-directed IRA that she set up. She switched it over to Roth, and it's self-directed in the sense that she could invest in anything she wants, essentially. So if you look at that top left corner, real estate's on there. So you could take your 401k money, and instead of putting it into stocks and bonds and all that other stuff, you could invest it in real estate investments and go out and buy real estate investments. And that's one of the things that she's using to fund different investments that she's going after, because she likes the returns on those investments better than some of these others. Number 6, create your LLC in Wyoming. This is so basic. I don't know if you guys knew this or heard this before. Why do you create it in Wyoming? I have 25 LLCs, and all of them are in New Jersey because I'm a dope, but I'm going to change all of them. Because in Wyoming, you do not have to, there's a couple of things. So first of all, has LLC privacy. It does not require the members or managers to be listed on public record.
Trump's rally in California's Coachella Valley.
All right. It also has no corporate or personal state income tax. So why does I really care about the first one, not the second. I mean, I care about the second, we all do, but the first one is really crucially important. So if you think about it like this, like if you have LLCs, what is the whole point of an LLC? Is to limit your risk, essentially. And the cool part about it, especially with investment properties, is when you form an LLC, all right, I don't have personal liability, which is great, but I could still get sued. I could still lose, money from that business. The reason why she does everything in Wyoming is because it is a giant pain in the ass to figure out who even owns it to be able to sue you. Like, I mean, you ever try to we watch movies and like somebody's getting served with papers and it's like, if you can't find me, you can't give them to me. Like, that's essentially what it is. Like, if you can't find that person, how do you sue them? And if you do find them and you're able to sue somebody, you have to do it in Wyoming. So the reality is like, it doesn't make sense for these people that are like trying to go after you with a frivolous lawsuit to go after somebody if you own your LLC in Wyoming. Because it's A, pain in the ass to find you, and B, even harder to actually sue you. It's a great place to get an LLC. You could do it from New Jersey. You have the same rights as a Wyoming resident. So if you're gonna open up an LLC ever in your life, open it up in Wyoming. Number 7. So I thought this is a super, super dense conversation. So this is not like something that I'm gonna be able to go into great detail on. But I've never seen somebody approach investment the way that her advisors are teaching her to approach it, because it's really strategic. So it's this thought process of, all right, you have short-term strategies, private money lending, wholesaling, flips, cash purchase programs. You have medium-term strategies, residential rentals, subject to financing, small commercial properties, business investments. And then you have long-term strategies, apartment buildings, medical offices, retail, storage, and industrial. She is becoming really intelligent and really strategic about where she's putting her money and why. And this is what that looks like. They actually create investment policies. So the investment policies are, what percentage of my business is in my total investments are in what categories? This is an example. This is not like the example that everybody should follow, so don't like take it as such. But it's basically like, all right, like my total investment, fund is 100%. Where am I putting all my money? I'm personally so lopsided in real estate. Like, I just know that I am, where I'm kind of to the point where it's like, it probably makes more sense for me to invest in other investment vehicles, like, in the near future, just because it's better to have some balance. Like, and so you just have to like figure out, like, I mean, I have stocks and bonds, I have insurance, but I haven't used insurance the way she uses insurance, which I'm about to talk about. So, just knowing that like there's ways to focus on this, and if you don't have a financial planner or if you don't have anybody sitting down that's actually doing this with you, maybe you should, but if nothing else, maybe you should at least take a look at what your portfolio looks like. Number 8, revocable trust. She didn't go into a great amount of this, but I threw this one in here because this is something that I'm starting to realize is super important. Revocable trust is very simple. It's the idea that a trust is a legal document that allows you to manage your assets while you're alive and control how they're distributed after you die. Pretty simple. Many of you think of a will. The thing about a will is this is a better document. Like, this is better for your heirs. They have to do less legwork to try to actually, use. And I'll give you an example of a will. When something goes into probate, there's a time period. Think of your spouse. Let's just say you control the finances in your household, and you have a spouse and you own, 5 rental properties. Well, what happens if you die and the will takes 2 months to go through probate? And what if you don't have any disposable cash laying around? How is your spouse going to pay for the mortgages and the insurance and all of that on those rental properties? Are they going to go into default because you just didn't set your documents up properly? Like, you have to be smart about that. A trust allows you to do that. So I'm going to go through these 5 points real quick. You control the assets in the trust, living in a house, spending money from investments, privacy. The trust agreement and assets aren't part of the public record, unlike a will. Avoid probate. You could avoid the probate process, which is expensive and lengthy. Update beneficiaries. You could change who receives your assets, how much they receive, and when they receive them. And provide for disability. You can name someone to make financial decisions for you if you become unable to do so. It's a smart way to set up everything that you have. Go out and get revocable trusts. Simple process, and it'll just change your world. Go ahead.
So what's the difference between revocable and irrevocable?
You can't change it.
Once you do an irrevocable, that's it?
Yeah, you can't change it. So if you want to have control, don't do it that way. Go ahead.
So just another granular question. So let's say I have properties now that I've been thinking to do this, but I haven't done it.
Yep.
So the properties have mortgages on them. Well, one is cash, two have mortgages. And if you transfer that into even an LLC, they're on my name now, which is a
Yeah.
mistake. How do you avoid the
We're talking about two separate things. I understand the question. So what you're talking about is, I'm going to say it right now. So the question is like, what if I have mortgages on investment properties that are in my name, they're not in LLCs? Will this screw that up? And the answer is no, because it has nothing to do with the change of the ownership style of the home that you own or the homes that you own. It has all to do with encompassing all of these things, who basically who owns those entities as a whole, and it's a trust. So it's not, there's no issue there. It's not gonna notify the bank.
But you do have to transfer the mortgage to be, the trust to be in charge of the mortgage, right? Because it can't be the individual. You have to shift all the assets. into the
Correct.
trust.
Yes is the short answer. I'm gonna be honest with you, this is not my expertise. I am not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. But what I will say is that it will not trigger like payments. You're not gonna, it's not gonna force you to pay the,
insurance on the house?
Yeah.
Does it need to be changed?
I know for a fact that it doesn't, because we actually just did this one of my partners did this on a property that we own together, where he put everything in a trust, and it was one document that needed to get signed that doesn't even go to the bank. So it was pretty straightforward. And I'm in the process of doing the same. Number 9, how infinite banking works. I've never even heard of this term. I am not an expert in it, but it was something that I thought was just an interesting concept that's worth actually talking about. So infinite banking is you go out and you buy a whole life insurance policy. It's very expensive to buy a whole life insurance policy. I'm telling you that up front. So this is something where if you have a chunk of money that you want to invest in something, this might be a way that you could go out and invest it. You have to decide with you and your financial planner. But you basically go out and you buy a whole life insurance policy, and there's a death benefit that comes with that. So if for whatever reason you die, well, now you have this whole life policy and you have insurance for your heirs, which is a good thing in and of itself. The second piece of it, though, is when you buy that whole life insurance policy, you're able to borrow against it once you've paid into it. So if there's enough money where, let's just say you put $100,000 into this whole life policy and you've met the standard that they need to meet, you can now borrow that $100,000 back. And there's a couple of things that you should know about this. Is one, when you borrow it back, it's a non-taxable event. So you could borrow that money back, and it's not like you have to tell the government that you just made an extra $100,000, because you didn't, you're borrowing it. The other thing is you don't have to apply for it like you would a mortgage. You don't have to go through all the steps of going out and, it's a hassle to get a mortgage. You don't have to think about all that stuff because it's your money. They're essentially giving it back to you. You have to be careful with this for a couple reasons. The most important reason is if you deplete the policy to the point where there's nothing there and you die, there's no insurance being paid. So you got to make sure that you're paying it back and you're being intelligent about how you use these funds. But it's kind of an interesting thing to go out and, I'm just using that $100,000 thought process. If I go out and I spend $100,000 right now and it gives me insurance, let's just say of whatever, $500,000, and then I borrow that money back and go out and invest with it, well, now I kind of have the best of both worlds if I'm doing it intelligently. So it's infinite banking is what it's called. You could look into it further. Number 10. This is more conceptual than it is like an actual strategy. When I was having this conversation and with Kendra, she said something to me that was just whoa. It was this 100-year thought process. So the 100-year thought process was, she was like, I don't know about you guys, but this is the way my brain works, is I'm building, whether you want to call it a legacy, whether you want to call it like, an investment portfolio, whatever the hell you want to call it. Like, I'm building that for who? For my kids. Like, she's not building it for her kids at all. And I, like, that kind of like struck me, and it almost sounds like wrong when you first hear it. But she said, no, I'm not building it for my kids. I'm building this for 100 years from now. And that's the way I have to approach this. And the reason why she builds it, conceptually for 100 years from now. So really, who's that impacting? Your grandchildren? Like, if you build an investment portfolio that's structured in a way that it still stands 100 years from now, your kids are golden. Like, your kids are way better than if you built it for them. And so the thought process is, how could I build something that my kids don't necessarily have to touch? It's just a well-oiled machine that's still rolling 100 years from now. Because, listen, I have 4 beautiful little girls. That's my heart and soul. But the truth of it is I don't know at this point. They're young. I don't know who's going to be interested in real estate investment. Some of them may have no interest in that whatsoever. Like, I don't know who's going to be like, I want to sell the whole portfolio and just take the funds and go on vacation. Like, you don't know what your kids are thinking, and like what they're, maybe they have spouses that get in the way, that like, God forbid, divorces and whatever else. Like, there's all sorts of challenges that come up for that next generation. And if you're building it and giving them the ability to let life corrupt it, you're not really doing probably the best for them. Like, and you're certainly not doing the best for their kids. And if you want to build something that's bigger and better and, stands the test of time, you got to build it that way. And so I think that like when I heard her speak to that, and like when, it was really like an eye-opening thing for me personally, because I was like, I have to change structurally how I do some of this. And it might mean, it depends on who you are and where you are in your career, but it might mean buying different types of investments. So for me, like, I have very hands-on investments. Like, that's not great for heirs. So like, there may come a point in time where I liquefy my whole portfolio and buy, a hotel, big building, or, buy a storage facility or whatever it is, something that's at a much grander scale that can be managed by, a company that does it for them and just pays them out dividends. Like, you have to just think differently if you're thinking 100 years from now. And I felt like that philosophy was something that resonated with me. So she asked these very hard questions. Some of them are going to sound like they're not such hard questions, but they actually are if you really get into it. What would you do? What would I do if I had an extra $10 million? I mean, that's a great question. I wish we all had that problem. But she's being very strategic about it. It's like, if I had an extra $10 million, what is the best way to make that $10 million grow for 100 years? And she was looking at like the way everything was about that. What is the worst thing that could happen, and how would I get back to where I am? That's like, if everything went wrong and I foreclosed on everything, how would I get back here, and maybe how would I do it better? If I could only work 2 hours a week in my business, what would I do? Now that is a question every person in here should ask themselves. And I realize that's so loaded in the sense that like, 2 hours, like that's nothing. Yeah, it's nothing, but if you approach it systematically and say, I have 2 hours a week that I could dedicate to real estate, what would I do? I would probably want to be 2 hours worth of listing presentations. Like, maybe an hour of listing presentations, an hour of negotiation. Like, and how do you get there? You hire VAs and you go out and you have them cold call, and you set up structures so that you're only working those 2 hours. Like, the whole thought process is like, how do you simplify your business to like, to the nth degree? If I need to make it back, would I do it the way I lost it? And it's just getting to like, understanding like structurally, is my business in the right place? Are my finances in the right place? All right, so let me just see what time it is. I got 11:45. This last section is actually a shorter one, so I'm just gonna go into it. And we'll get out of here early. So mindset shifts. So this is Carly. She's become a friend of mine. Like I met her briefly in Seattle. She's actually one of the newer 30s, and it's kind of like, you ever have like a new agent teach you something and you're like, oh, like, that's awesome. Like the truth of it is like she's by far not a new agent. Like she is an absolute rock star in commercial real estate down in Miami. That's why she's a 30. But the truth of it is like she said something to me as like, I'm kind of like one of the OGs of the group at this point, and I was having a conversation with her and she said this and I just was like, whoa. What if you were to wake up tomorrow and only have what you were grateful for today? And I just was like, what a mindset shift. Like we all like take so many things for granted, but just recognizing that like we woke up today, like, we have all these things to be grateful for. And it's like what she does every single night, like some people do affirmations and different things. She goes through and she just like, she lives by this mantra. This is like who she is as a person. And she goes through and is thankful for all the things like the clean air that she breathes and like her family and like all this is like, that is her daily session, affirmation, prayer, whatever you want to call it, that she goes through because she's like, I don't want to wake up without those things the next day. And that's that's what she believes. I thought that was such an awesome way to approach life. And it just kind of like gives you a different approach in terms of your day-to-day feelings about where you are in your life. Harrison Beecher, by the way, I'm jumping around to different people. So Harrison Beecher is a force to be reckoned with. Love the guy. You're going to see him a lot, on NAR national scene if you're into that. But basically, Harrison did like a whole session for us. I had him be one of the speakers. And one of the things that he spoke about, this is just a quick hitter, but I thought was awesome, is he runs an event every single year. He's in Washington, D.C. He runs an event every year called OwnerCon. Building wealth together. And Bill, you did this for the board. Like, you helped us launch like a housing initiative for, in lower income areas to try to build home ownership. And, we did like a whole summit related to that with North Central. He does this as an individual agent. And he basically, every year he hypes it up as OwnerCon and he builds this event and it's all about teaching people in his marketplace the benefits of home ownership. Every one of us could do that. Like, it's not a hard thing to do. You guys could probably talk home ownership better than most people in life. Like, all the benefits from it. And if you can't, come see me. I could certainly help you with that. But like building that out, like this is like a community service that he does. Like, and I realize that sometimes we think of community service as like not self-serving, but like it serves his community and also serves his business. Because he is turning people into homeowners because he's just educating them properly. And for him, like, this is like a labor of love, but I love the concept. Like, I think it's a really special thing. He also did a deep dive on this book, From Strength to Strength. Listen, we're all at different points in our career here. Some of us are babies. Some of us are old men and women. Like, the truth is like what stage you're in your life, like, it changes who you are and what your skill set is. And so one of the things he acknowledged, he had us all stand up and he says, like, with your chest, I'm not as skilled today in some areas where I once excelled. It's the truth. Like, I could tell you right now, and I'm being dead honest, for years, like a decade of my life, I lived in my office. I would leave my office at 2 o'clock in the morning because I would work my tail off. I don't do that anymore. Like, I still work like crazy, but like, I don't do it the way that I used to do it. Like, I don't have the energy to be at my office, or I would be divorced without kids, essentially. If I stayed in my office till 2 o'clock in the morning, my wife would murder me. Like, and rightfully so. Like, I'm giving baths and putting kids to bed. Like, the truth of it is like, that's an area of my business or my life that I'm no longer as good at, however you want to say it. Like, it changes. So as you progress, like, we think that we lose skills, but we also gain a lot of skills. It's just different. And so what he went into that I thought was really good is solidify your crystallized intelligence as you embrace a new chapter of growth. Recognize and embrace a different kind of strength in this process. So what is crystallized intelligence? It's this idea, it's the knowledge and skills that a person has acquired over time through their culture and experiences. Book smart is an easy way to think about it. But it also has a characteristic that I want to point out. Crystallized intelligence includes verbal ability, social knowledge, and the ability to perform habits without much thought. There are things that I could do off the cuff today that, like, when I was a brand new agent, I had no chance of. It's the truth. Like I wouldn't be able to speak about half the things I could speak about. Somebody asked me a question, I'm like this now. Like, whereas before I didn't have that ability. But what did I trade? I traded the ability to stay in my office till 2 o'clock in the morning, working my tail off, to that, to like just knowing these answers like off the cuff because it's just habit, right? So I don't know where you are in that spectrum, but his whole point to this was embrace where you are in that spectrum and use those strengths to the best of your ability, because you have strengths that the person next to you doesn't have because you're at a different point in your life. And that's the truth of it. We have to recognize where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are. If you're not capable of working till 2 o'clock in the morning like I used to, okay, maybe you find leverage to help somebody do it for you so you could compete with that person that has that energy. Like, and that's kind of the thought process. You have to know where you are in your own spectrum. So contextualize, synthesize, analyze the innovative and different new work of others. So like, if you're at a point in your career where maybe you don't have the spark that you used to, because a lot of us, like, you've been doing this for 20, 30 years, like you just don't have that, like, oh, I have new ideas every 5 seconds. Like, find the person that has new ideas, come to wherever it is you need to go to find those ideas, and then use your experience to like basically turn that energy into something that's useful for you. Like, and that's the whole point of as we age and as we change in our careers, that's what we need to do. Take confidence in your skill sets, own them, utilize your established skills over raw, new creative energy. I just thought that like he was speaking to the people in the group that have been there a while. And that maybe don't have the same like that everybody else had in the room where they're super excited. And the last thing he said is, I'm becoming proficient in the next endeavor that will define my legacy and how am I remembered. So I just thought it was a cool concept. In the book, I felt like he really drove home. This is a terrible picture, but it's a picture that I wanted to show nonetheless. So I should have brought it. That was silly. So Dominic from Washington, he has a 3D printer. And Dominic spent 25 hours for each of these little models it's 3D printing models of New York City. They are exquisite. Like, just like basically like every building you can imagine in New York City built into this little model. And he gave every single person in the group one of these. He flew them out from Washington. He spent 25 hours on each one of these. There's 100+ people in the room. He took a long time to do it. Why am I highlighting Dominic? Because I gotta be honest with you, I didn't need this. This didn't change my life in any way. But the fact that he was committed to doing something so nice for every person in that room makes me want to promote his business. And that's why I wanted to highlight him, because the truth is like, good for him. Like, he clearly gets it. Like, he did this last year in Seattle. Now I have 2. I have one from Seattle. I have one from New York City. Different concepts. They're not both cityscapes, but it's a pretty cool thing that he did. And I appreciate having him in the group, but I wanted to highlight it because, quite frankly, like, it's the little things sometimes that make all the difference. Like, you don't think he's gonna get referrals from that? Believe me, every person in there knows who Dominic is because of those little, 3D renderings of whatever he's given us. I'm highlighting these 3. I already highlighted Carly and Nellis, but Mary Harmon in the middle. All 3 of those people, since we did this event, have sent me handwritten notes. Like, I know it's a simple little thing. It's just like old school basic stuff. Well, excuse me, 2 of them sent handwritten notes to thank me. Nellis sent me, I don't know if you guys remember, I talked about this last year, but Send Out Cards. Send Out Cards does, like, he took pictures from the event. He created a postcard with all the pictures that got mailed to me. And it was a postcard letter, I don't remember, something like that. But it got mailed to me, and it was like, he was just saying thank you. I don't know how long it took him to send that, but I gotta be honest, like, it's the type of thing that you want to give these people referrals. If I have anybody in Alabama, believe me, Mary's getting it. Like, if I have anybody, for commercial real estate in Miami, I know who I'm going to. Like, Carly's getting that piece of business. Nellis in DC, like, there are different people that, I just feel like we just don't do the little things sometimes just to say thank you. And if you do, it's gonna lead to good business for you.
What was the name of the card company?
Send Out Cards. I can send you a link if you want. So, this is a fun topic. All right, so Kara Pierce is legitimately one of my favorite people that I know. I love her. Love her, love her, love her. I find her to be such an interesting person. She is just a force. she does like, tons of GCI. She kind of like does it in her sleep. Not that she doesn't work hard, but she just like, she's just like very good at what she does. And because of all of these emotions that I feel towards Kara, how much I love her as a person, I was like, I want to bring you up on stage and have you do a session. And so she was like, I don't really do that. And I was like, no, I want you to do it. And she was like, I'll do it if you interview me. So I'm like, okay, like not a problem. I love to interview people. Like, it's just like, it's second, nature for me. So I get her up there to do this interview, and I gotta be honest with you, this was the interview. Like, and it wasn't, and I'm not knocking on Kara at all. It was, for me as the interviewer, it was a train wreck because I have never in my entire life sat next to somebody who basically didn't want to answer my questions. like I would ask a question and she would go in the opposite direction of my question. And I try to bring her back and she would go in the opposite direction of that. And it was like, and listen, it's like politics. But here's the thing, and I'm not even knocking on her because there's a couple of interesting things. Both of us probably drank a little too much the night before, so that might have played a role. But what I really think it came down to is she's very comfortable with me, I'm very comfortable with her, and she just like, it was this kind of like authentic, just, we were laughing back and forth, and rather than sticking to topic, it was kind of all over the place. Now, I joke around with the train wreck thing, but like the God's honest truth is, it was awkward magic, like is probably the way to explain it. Because it wasn't this like, interview that I expected to go in the direction that I did. And that's the reason why I'm bringing it up. Because I have never interviewed anybody in my entire life where I had more people in the audience comment about that interview than Kara. Like, I had people coming up to me left and right like, oh my God, that was so funny. You guys are so real. You guys, like, I mean, it was just like, kind of like, it was a moment of, in the midst of like all of this very serious real estate talk and investment talk, it was a moment of levity. And it was, they got to see just like realness. Like it was just like very genuine, authentic selves. And I bring that up because sometimes, like, I can't speak for everybody in that room, but the people that I spoke to, which were dozens, that came up to me and talked to me about Kara, all were like, I love her. I love her. She didn't answer my freaking questions. They love her. Like, and I just think that like, to me, like it tells you a lot because you could fail miserably. It could be that like proverbial train wreck, so to speak, but it was anything but. It wasn't a train wreck. Like she's the most memorable person probably of the whole event. Like, because she just did her thing. She was who she was. And like, I think that just tells a lot. Like when you guys are so worried about like, am I gonna screw up? Is this gonna go wrong? Sometimes it can go horribly wrong and be like unquestionably more right than it would have been if it went normal. Like, you just gotta remember that. Cyrus, this character. So Cyrus got up there and did his thing. And I interviewed him. This is like one of my best friends. And so Cyrus, he also wanted me to interview him. So it went in the complete opposite way of Kara, because Kara, I was asking questions and she wasn't answering them. Cyrus, I asked one question and he pretty much took up the entire time answering it. So he gave a really, heartfelt story, and it was a moving piece that he went into. But one of the things, and he actually mentioned this example, and I told him to repeat it for 30 Under 30 because both Kara and with Cyrus, there was no prep. We just went up on stage. I tried to prep, and both of them were like, Mike, we got this. And I was like, okay. So they didn't know what questions I was going to ask. They didn't know anything going into it. And listen, they both did really a great job. But with Cyrus, the one thing that I got up on stage is I said, I want you to talk about what you said while he was here, actually. Because he brought up this example of, I don't know if you remember this example for those of you who are here, but he brought up Starry Night. And he was like, sometimes we have this puzzle piece in front of us, like a day that we're going through. We don't know how it's going to end. And it is complete darkness. Like it's this black piece and this void in our life, and we feel like we're alone, or we feel like the world is going to end, or there's just like this horrible sensation that we have around us. And what we don't realize is that one little black piece is basically a piece within Starry Night. And it's like when you put all the puzzle pieces together, like eventually you get to this beautiful image. But we don't see the beautiful image in that moment. We only see that one puzzle piece. I just feel like that's such a beautiful sentiment and something that I wanted to repeat again, because whatever you're going through, believe me, it's part of a bigger picture. You just haven't seen it yet. And that's one of the things that I always take away from 30 Under 30 is this idea that like there's more to it, and that dark puzzle piece is something that's going to be, going to help you down the road. I'm going to end with a couple more slides, but basically like spend less than you make and invest the difference wisely. That was the takeaway more so than anything else at 30 Under 30. I've showed you this slide before. This is something that, Bo is one of the most successful 30s of them all. But basically, he said this to me years ago and it stuck with me. Like, some of you guys own investment properties. Some of you, have thriving businesses. Some of you are just getting going. Like, you just got to start. If you don't own something, buy something. Like, start there. If you don't have a VA or if you don't have systems in your business, start today. Just pick one. Move forward with whatever it is you need to do to get going. And then, listen, you might wake up 3 weeks from now and it might be a dark puzzle piece, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to end in, Starry Night. Like, it grows over time. And so half of the failures that I had led to my biggest successes, and everybody in that whole room could agree with that. If you want to plant a forest, this concept is like kind of what I spoke about. Is this idea is if you want to plant a forest in your business, if you want to plant a forest in your life and investment, you can't plant one tree, wait for it to grow up and plant another one. Like, you got to plant a lot of seeds. Like, that's just the way it works. And so, don't be afraid to try ideas, go out there and just do it. I appreciate your guys' time. Thank you so much.